Okay, let's dive into today's chapter, which is Samwell II. And man, it's been a long time since we've been with Sam. And this, I think, is one of those things that's also done really well in the show. It's essentially going to be the revolt at Craster's Keep.
Yeah, a lot of really good action. I mean, maybe not good considering the fact that we see some people die, but it also has a ton of lore about Beyond the Wall that I think is pretty excellent. I was kind of shocked by how much was packed into this chapter last week when we looked ahead. I was like, okay, this is a pretty long Sam chapter, and I realized, oh, we're at like the Crasters Keep rebellion essentially. But this is the second time going to Craster's Keep, and it's not going to end as peacefully as the first time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there actually is a line here too towards the end of this chapter that I think is like really cool foreshadowing. And it's another one of those threads that I just love. We pick up on the reread, you know, when it's like, oh, there's a line here that's said, and it's amidst this chaos of all this other stuff that's going on that you
Mhm.
don't think about its future implications towards the end of this book. Right. And so maybe I don't know if Jimmy knows what line I'm talking about, but we'll
I think I
certainly
have a very good line.
yeah,
I have
we'll
a very
certainly
good
get
idea.
there.
Yeah.
So here we go. 44 survivors have reached Craster's Keep of the 300 men the Watch had at the Fist. Some of the men are becoming ornery because there is so little food, and Craster seems to be hiding a larder. Mormont speaks with Sam about Dragonglass, discuss that the Watch once knew the purpose of obsidian weapons. Their true enemies are the others, but they had forgotten. Craster soon makes it clear he wants the crows gone, and several members start to accuse him of not sharing all of his food. The argument worsens until finally Craster attacks Clubfoot Carl, beginning the mutiny at Craster's Keep. Dirk slits Craster's throat, and while Mormont screams at them, there is no crime worse than murder at a host dinner's table. Alo Lophand stabs the Lord Commander. Sam watches in horror as the deserters begin to rape Craster's wives and sees the few men still loyal to the Watch flee because they're outnumbered. Gren, Giant, Dolorous Ed, and a few others get away. Mormont, dying, commands Sam to return to the wall with all haste and tell everyone what's happened. He also asks Sam to tell his son Jorah that Mormont's dying wish is for Jorah to take the Black. His last words to Sam are, "Tell Jorah, forgive him, my son. Please go." Sam is approached by Gilly, who has recently given birth to a son, and two of Craster's others. Older wife, and two of Craster's older other wives. Gilly asks Sam to take her with him to flee on horseback someplace warm.
Lots goes on in this chapter, a lot of suffering and then tension building the whole time. And with the crow in the background yelling, corn, corn, snow, snow. And it almost builds up a percussion underneath the chapter's underbelly to lead into what is, one of the more shocking moments so far in the series of, Lord Commander Mormont dying. It's a pretty massive moment for a character that is seen as kind of a side piece. He's actually been very, very important in the chapters of John and Sam as we've gotten to this point. So it's pretty big. I love being back in Sam's chapter, by the way. I just had an argument with someone in the comment section on my YouTube channel, and they were saying that George R. R. Martin can't write heroic fantasy to save their lives. And I said, you do not understand Samwell Tarly's arc. If you truly believe that and you've read all the books, Samwell Tarly is an unlikely hero. And we actually see him make heroic decisions time after time, even ever his nature is telling him, quit, sit down, die. He always ends up somehow becoming someone who's overcoming something. So I think Samwell's a great POV. He's one I've always appreciated more on reread. And the first sentence of this chapter is so good. The first few sentences it says, "Up in a loft, a woman was giving birth noisily, while below a man lay dying by the fire. Samwell Tarly could not say which frightened him more." And this is so A plus character work from George right here to tell you exactly what you need to know about Samwell Tarly. He's not sure if the lady giving birth upstairs or the man dying near the fire, which one's worse, because he is so timid and so inexperienced when it comes to ladies, which we will see now grow with Gilly. But I just thought in 2 lines, he tells us so much about Sam's character.
Yeah, there's a line later too where after they've killed Craster and all hell has broken loose, and the women come to Sam, and Sam's like, "I'm not supposed to be talking to you." They're
Yeah.
like, and the one older one is essentially like, "Yeah, I don't think that matters so much anymore."
Yeah, in the whole chapter, Samuel is kind of wrestling with the idea that Craster is terrible, right? He's awful, but he's also a friend of the watch. He's providing them some shelter and a little bit of food when he can, and it's the way it is, right? That's how it is beyond the wall. And the whole chapter is Samuel wrestling with the idea of this is how things are, but that's not actually how they should be. And slowly we will see Samwell kind of start to challenge some of these things and overcome them. And he kind of goes into in the face of many different conventions that we see in throughout Westeros, but also in a fantasy character that's supposed to be cowardly. He actually overcomes a lot of those cliches and conventions as well. So this is just the beginning for Samwell in many ways. But I thought it was definitely funny the moment you mentioned, like, maybe you shouldn't worry about talking to us now. I don't think it's the biggest deal. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, because that really is so much of his character too. And later, when they're making fun of him, right? Because there's actually kind of a cool little insight to Sam. Because remember, I mean, this is the only second chapter we've gotten of this character. We've
Yeah.
seen him in the other books all through Jon Snow's eyes, and it's like, all right, here's Sam. He's kind of this pathetic guy. But here you begin to get a little. Now that we're 2 chapters in with him, you begin to get a little bit more of his personality from the inside. I actually really like the line where, people are kind of poking fun of him at him for being Sam the Slayer. And they were trying to get him to come shoot the arrow. Like, oh, we want to see the Slayer shoot. And he knows, he's like, well, he's like, they're just doing it to make fun of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like small Paul was never small, right? Giant is 5 foot nothing. And he's like, guys, I'm smarter than you. Like, I'm aware that you're making fun of me, and I don't want it. Can't I just be Samwell Tarly? Is what he says. Can't I just be Samwell? And they're like, no, of course not. But also, I think it's kind of interesting whenever he ends up having the conversation. Is it with Garrett that he has the conversation in this chapter, where basically he's saying, yeah, these nicknames might be mean, but like when it comes from someone like me or John,
Yeah.
it can be a thing of endearment. So he's kind of learning. It's Gren. It was actually Gren.
Yeah.
So he's actually kind of learning how to have camaraderie, right? Sam's not the most adept when it comes to social interactions, I would say. So this is like a kind of a growing moment for him in that respect too. It's like, you can also be playful and have that kind of camaraderie with people that are in tough situations. The gallows humor, as some people call it, but in this case, it's less bullying and more just including you in the group to give you
Right.
a name.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who's played sports or anything, you all kind of develop, but it's not always poking fun. And he's actually getting that a little bit here. And I'll pull up, some of this stuff here too. So Sam is thinking, right? He could not face them, the mocking smiles, the mean little jests, the contempt in their eyes. Sam turned to go back the way he came, but his right foot sank deep in the muck, and whenever he tried to pull out his boot came off. He had to kneel to wrench it free. Laughter ringing in his ears, despite all his socks. The snow melt had soaked through to his toes by the time he's made his escape. Useless, he thought miserably. My father saw me true. I have no right to be alive when so many brave men are dead. Gren was tending the fire pit south of the compound gate, stripped to the waist as he split logs. His face was red with exertion, the sweat steaming off his skin, but he grinned as Sam came chuffing up. The others get your boot, Slayer? Him too. It was the mud. Please don't call me that. Why not? Gren said, honestly puzzled. It's a good name. You came by it fairly. Pip always teased Gren about being thick as a castle wall, so Sam explained patiently. Yep, always, thick as a castle wall there.
Who else do we know that's thick as a castle wall, Matt?
Be Dunk the Lunk. All
Oh
right.
my.
Duncan the Tall. It's just a different way of calling me a coward, he says, standing on his left leg and wringing his muddy boot. They're mocking me the same way they mock Bedwick for calling him giant. He's not a giant, though, said Gren, and Paul was never small. Well, maybe when he was at the babe at the breast, but not after. You did slay the other, though. It's not the same. And then he says, I was scared. He says, no more than me. So, yeah, like you said, that's that full exposition of what Jimmy's talking about there. He said, let them call you Slayer. Who cares? Because then now they are like, you killed them. I mean, they'd be dead
And
if it
he'll
weren't
do
for
it again
Sam. Yeah.
in just a little bit, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. They'd be dead without Sam. So it is a term of personal endearment. So it's not always actually like making fun of, or
Yeah.
whatever. So there is that. And I think what we should do here is we should kind of continue on with like Sam's story and then come back to some of the theories and stuff like that, because there's a lot, and
Yeah, I
there's
have
kind of
quite a
like
few things highlighted.
there's like three different threads in this going on. You've got like the main plot, you've got like Sam, you've got what's going on with the Night's Watch and Mormont, and then there's all the hidden meaning stuff with like theories and stuff like that. Like, all gets really crazy.
Yeah.
So continuing on with Sam, yeah, I mean, all this chaos is really sort of about to ensue. He talks to Mormont, and he's talking about, the Fist of the First Men,
Mhm.
and Mormont's talking about like the Children of Forest, they're all dead. And it's almost like this is the moment, and it's so unfortunate that Mormont is, I think, really beginning to see the value in Sam,
Yeah.
and and thinking like, okay, this guy actually kind of knows what he's talking about. And now that we've sort of seen more of this stuff happen, he could be like such an important person to this whole thing. And then, Mormont's about to die, so it doesn't really go that far. But I do think it's still important for Sam's character, because now he's got some of the members of the Night Watch kind of befriending him outside of John, and he's even gained a little bit of respect from Mormont.
Yeah, I think also Mormont, one of his talents, or at least one of his goals, while being a part of the Night's Watch, is to get the most out of people, no matter who they are. Right? He's being handed some of the least capable people in the realm, some of the most devious people, criminals, and he's still trying to figure out what their use can be to succeed at their mission. And I think he looks at Sam and he sees a unicorn because not many people at the Night's Watch could read like Sam, can articulate like Sam, write, read, understand things. So he sees Sam, and I think he sees value in him because he is so different.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, really, when you look at all the people they normally get, I mean, they normally don't get lords or, highborn people. And they actually happen to get two at the same time, in John and Sam. And those are the two that kind of rise up in the ranks, really. I mean, yeah, Sam can't fight or anything, but Maester Aemon chooses him specifically because
Mhm.
he knows he's smart and intelligent, and he will be a strong steward. And the same thing, which is why Mormont chooses John. I mean, yeah, initially John views it as a slap in the face because he wants to be a ranger, and then that's part of the thing. I mean, it's the same thing with Sam. We just don't really get much of that story told, but in a way, we're kind of getting it now. Where Sam, I think, is also beginning to realize his value.
Oh, definitely. And, as he gets more context of how to interact with people, he'll become more and more of the person that he has set out to be.
Yeah. So here we go, and this is the way where everything just kind of goes, all crazy, right? Where Craster standing there too. So the old bear broke off as Craster emerged from beneath the deer hide flaps of his door. The wildling smiled, revealing a mouth of brown, rotten teeth. I have a son, and then Mormont's Raymond is over there. Son, son, son. Lord Commander's face was stiff. I'm glad for you. Are you now? Me, I'll be glad when you and yours are gone. Past time, I'm thinking. So then somebody says, it's, not Sam that says it, but he says, we could take him. Craster's head turned, his eyes narrowed, and he spits on Sam's foot. What did you say to me, Slayer?
Of course.
Sam's open and closed his mouth. I only meant if you didn't want him, or his mouth to feed, his winter coming on, we could take him. My son, my blood, you'd think I'd give him to your crows. I only thought, you have no sons, you expose them. Gilly said as much, you leave them in the woods. That's why you only have wives here, and daughters who grow up to be wives. And then Mormont's like, all right, man, Sam, you said too much, right? He's like,
Mhm.
my lord, and inside. So he takes him in, and this is where everything all basically just like breaks to hell.
Yes. And, with the crow calling, with the arguments going, and then the fire that they're all sitting next to, it almost feels like you can feel the heat building in the
Yeah.
scene.
The tension is definitely rising, right? Skip ahead a little bit. Craster's got his own to feed, said Giant. All these women, he's given us what he can. Don't you bloody believe it? The day we leave, he'll tap a keg of mead and sit down to feast on ham and honey. He'll laugh at us starving out in the snow. He's a bloody wildling, is all he is. There's none of them friends on the watch. He kicked at the Bannerman's corpse. Asked him if you don't believe me. They burned the Ranger's corpse at sunset in the fire that Gren had been feeding earlier that day. Tim Stone and Garth of Old Town carried out the naked corpse and swung him twice before heaving him into the flames. His name was Bannon, Lord Commander Mormont said, as the flames took him. He was a brave man, a good ranger. He came to us from, where did he come from? Down White Harbor, someone called out. Mormont nodded. He came to us from White Harbor and never failed in his duty. And now his watch has ended.
Yeah,
right?
this is a comedic moment in the show, actually.
Yeah.
And here, I think it also kind of reads that way. I think it's a little bit humorous to read it this way, but also in somewhat ways sad, also melancholy.
Yeah, that this you do also begin to also feel like this is what the watch has come to, essentially. That they are like, I mean, one, it's kind of interesting just because there's so many things going on in this chapter where like they do question like, why are we hanging out with this guy? Like, he is a wildling and he's doing something with the babies. It's like, yeah, he's a friend to the watch, but not a really good friend.
Yeah, and he's also horrible to his daughters, right? Like he's
He's a terrible person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, right. As the food begins to come out, 2 loaves, Clubfoot Carl complained down to the bench. How stupid are you women? We need more bread than this. Lord Commander Mormont gives him a hard look. Take what you're given and be thankful. Would you sooner be out in the storm eating snow? We'll be there soon enough. Clubfoot Carl did not flinch from the old bear's wrath. I'd sooner eat what Craster's hiding, my lord. Craster narrows his eyes. I gave you crows enough. I got my women to feed. So you admit you've got a secret larder. How else to make it through the winter? I'm a godly man, Craster started. Which, that's actually diving into, is he a godly man?
There's a whole lot to be said about Craster and his involvement with the gods and
the old gods.
I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff, honestly.
Because he's taking those babies out there. And how did that start? How did that, like, Craster to me is one of the most interesting characters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire, because he's meant, I think, from surface level to just be, he's this evil wildling guy that they happen to take in. And in a way, he's kind of like Walder Frey, where he's got all of these wives and he's terrible to them.
Yeah.
But this is a character who is he doing blood magic by giving these babies to the White Walkers? Has he communicated with them? Like, how did that start? Did he just have a son and he was like, I don't want anyone, he was just like, I don't want any sons. And so he just threw the baby away, and like, maybe, which I mean, obviously is an extremely terrible thing in its own right, but maybe he saw that it kept the whites or the White Walkers away, the others away. I mean, that's the really intriguing thing about this, is how did that whole process start?
Yes. I don't know if we'll ever have the answer to that question, unfortunately, but I am very curious if it was because he needed a way for the whites to not attack. I lean more towards the other option, which is Craster was just throwing out his male babies so he wouldn't have competition for his mates, aka his daughters, right? Which is disgusting. And I think maybe he just realized that the whites were taking the kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, sick. I'm getting protection while also being a complete and utter scumbag. Nice.
Yeah. There is a theory that we talked about before that Mance Rayder and Craster might be brothers.
Because he hates Mance Rayder.
Like, and the backstory on them both is that they are fathered by a man of the Night's Watch and mothered by a wildling woman.
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much to ask about Craster. Like, was he in the Night's Watch at one point? Did him and Mance, were these brothers?
He's one. Yeah, he's certainly one of the most mysterious characters. And why don't like the Thens or any of these other people go take him?
Yeah, it seems like he's somewhat protected. I mean, we can get into it. I have some stuff highlighted here.
Yeah, let's dive into it. Is he protected, or do they not know about him? Like, it's because his camp is so small. It might just be that the Night's Watch knows he exists and these other people don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just these lines, there had been no attacks while he'd been at Craster's, neither whites nor others, which, by the way, there's 2 or 3 different times where they separate whites and others. in this chapter. George is
Right.
clearly letting us know that there is a difference. We know this, but it's nice to see it reinforced. Nor would there be, Craster said. A godly man got no cause to fear such. I said as much to Mance Raider once when he comes sniffing round. He never listened. No more new crows or your swords or bloody fires. That won't help you. None when the white cold comes. Only the gods will help you then. You best be right with the gods. And Gilly had spoken of the white cold as well. She told them what sort of offerings Craster made to his gods. Sam had wanted to kill him when he had heard there are no laws beyond the walls. This is him also reinforcing, like, well, that's just the way it is. I got to do it. But I mean, so obviously the deal has been made. And then later on, we've been talking about this white cold, right? Sam asked Ren, do you think the whites are gone? Why don't they come to finish us? They only come when it's cold. Yes, said Sam. But is it the cold that brings the whites or the whites that bring the cold?
Yeah.
Good questions, right?
Yeah. It is a good question. And that's something you and I have speculated a lot about. And we, of course, have to wait till we get Winds of Winter. But according to like what you can read in the lore of A World of Ice and Fire, and we've done videos and I think full podcasts on this, there is what seems to be a very big difference between obviously the show version of the White Walkers and the book version of the White Walkers. In that,
Yes.
in the show, we know the Children of the Forest created them by putting the guy up and stabbing him as sort of like
Right.
a nuclear weapon to go try and deal with the oncoming invasion. In the books, that might not be the case.
It was not one of the big moments George had leaked to Dan and Dave. And also, I mean, I think that we're seeing here that they're clearly way more intelligent than it would appear, based on the
Yes.
prologue of Game of Thrones, which we've went over many, many times. But also the idea that they're capable of making a deal. Like they're making a deal here with Craster. I mean, that's what it is. They might not have sat down and wrote out a contract, but there's some sort of sentience to them to where they can accept this deal. You and I have been, putting it out there that we think that this is probably a full blown culture of
Yeah.
people that
It,
are maybe a little bit forgotten or whatever. Like they're up from the land of always winter, and most likely there's some sort of trigger, whether it's a climate event or magic or whatever. But
yeah.
these are not just mindless zombies walking around. And I think we also have to. The thing I took away from this, Matt, is that Craster might have a bigger hand in the White Walkers than we've ever considered. And it's the final sentences of this chapter that get me because they're talking about Gilly's son. And it says, the boys' brothers, said the old woman on the left, Craster's sons, the white cold's rising out there, Crow. I can feel it in my bones. These poor old bones don't lie. They'll be here soon. The sons. I mean, we're talking about decades of
Mhm.
Craster donating. So, like, a large portion of this army are just the sons, the
Right.
boys' brothers. It's like, man, Craster has kind of fueled this army a bit.
And that's what's interesting. And the show just shows us the one with the baby and they touch it and its eyes
Yeah.
turn blue, right? So, and this dives into the difference between like whites and the others slash White Walkers, right? The
Mm-hmm.
White Walkers are the full blown like ice creatures as opposed to the whites, which essentially are the zombies, right?
And yes, and this is what Sam was saying. He's saying, well, Dragon Glass was able to kill one of those pale things, but like we
Right.
don't know that it could kill one of the whites or the others.
Right. Yeah. And so that is right. One of the differences is the whites are just zombies. So,
Mm-hmm.
you look at a zombie, right? Like and in some ways, it's kind of just, it could even be almost like just a skeleton, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that you're fighting. So obviously, those don't evolve or adapt or change, but they're specifically going and taking these babies and turning their eyes blue.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't see baby White Walkers. We see them as like full grown old men, essentially. So do they get to live as White Walkers?
That's a
Right?
good
Do
question.
they, I mean, even the book versions, we don't see any baby ones. So we don't know. So we don't know what that is. And I would argue that one of the most telling difference, even though it is obviously the theory and speculation and sort of lore inside of the universe, is the Night King, the Night's King, right? There's a difference.
Yeah, big difference.
Like the there is no Night King in the books like there is in the show. There
Mm.
is the Night's King, which is just a regular dude who happened to be Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, 13th Lord Commander, and he, according to legend, marries what seems to be a White Walker woman. And so we would assume that she can speak to him or or whatever, even if she's using the speak of like the children of the forest, which is said to be like the sound of rustling leaves and
Uh-huh.
trees and all of those things, right? I mean, some of these people who may have green sight might be able to understand that language.
Yeah, and also if she really was, it's speculated. It's kind of like,
It's like
is she
legend
not?
lore,
Right, yeah.
right?
So, but if she is, I mean, that's also a point in the direction of what we've said that the White Walkers or the others are a complete other species slash culture
Right. That
that
may
are
have
could be a
that it
lot
that
more complex.
right, that it wasn't the children of the forest who created them like we saw in the show. So like that is something to keep in mind. Okay, so one of the lines I also liked here at the very beginning is Craster is talking about how he really doesn't like the crows, right? He says, "I fed you what I could, but you crows are always hungry. I'm a godly man, else I would have chased you off. You think I need the likes of him dying on my floor? You think I need all your mouth, little man?" The wildlings back. Crows. When did a blackbird ever bring good to a man's hall? I ask you, never, never. And I think, that's just something that's also kind of interesting as a line about like the three-eyed crow or just
Right.
crows and birds in general, which you could tie into the old gods because he also talks about being a godly man. Now we would have to imagine he doesn't worship the seven existing up there. He's worshiping the old gods.
Yeah, and there's definitely a line in here that kind of insinuates, I think it's from one of his daughter wives or whatever, grossness, that they kind of say that Craster's god are the whites.
Hmm.
And it's like, that's a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah,
Like, who knows? But what if the others are the true heirs or the true born of the old gods? Like, what if that's a thing?
could be.
What? That would be wild.
Yeah. And it might be, I mean, like it literally might be something like the Land of Always Winter versus like the Valyria, right? And Azor Ahai and R'hllor and the Great
Yeah.
Other, like these two gods, the ice and fire, like the whole thing. It could definitely come down to something like that.
And not to mention that all this Night's Watch and the wall and all this stuff matters. And Mormont goes off about this. He said, "We never knew, but we must have known once. The Night's Watch has forgotten its true purpose, Tarly. You don't build a wall 700 feet high to keep savages and skins from stealing women. The wall was made to guard the realms of men and not against other men, which is all the wildlings are when you come down right down to it. Too many years, Tarly, too many hundreds of thousands of years. We lost sight of the true enemy, and now he's here, and we don't know how to fight him. Is dragonglass made by the dragons, as a small foe like to say?" And then this is where Stamp says, "No, it's made from the fires of the earth. They called it obsidian." And Mormont says, "They can call it lemon pie for all I care. If it kills as you claim, I want more of it." And this is where they talk about how they found arrowheads and spearheads. And this part with Sam is very interesting. Sam had almost forgotten about the wildlings. So much had happened since. The children of the forest used dragonglass blades, he said. They they'd know where to find obsidian. The children of the forest are all dead, said Mormont. The first men killed half of them with bronze blades, and the Andals finished the job with iron. Why a glass dagger should the old bear broke off as Castor emerged, and this is where the son is born. But it's interesting. You cut him off right there because this is basically Sam being like, "Man, if we could only talk to the children of the forest, we might be able to figure this out." And turns out, we eventually do see children of the forest in the series. So this is all very obvious, actually, when you read it. We have forgotten the true purpose of this wall. We're thinking, oh, it's these zombie things, but who's to say that there's not a lot more to them?
Yeah. Um, yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Another line I like here too. Is just it's just something Sam notices. He's saying nights were the bad time when it got dark and cold. There had been no attacks while they had been at Craster's, neither whites nor others, like you said, nor would there be, Craster said. A godly man got no cause to fear, such I said as much in that to Mance Raider once, when he came sniffing round. He never listened, no more than you crows with your swords and your bloody fires. That won't help you none when the white cold comes. Only the gods will help you then. You best get right with the gods.
Yeah, and this is what I pointed out earlier, being like, obviously he's had pretty in-depth conversations with Mance Raider, and there's a deal. There's a deal in place. And I almost feel like Craster's kind of saying, like, you guys should be making sacrifices. It's kind of what it feels like. Like, you guys should have had this all figured out prior. Now you're not. Now you're screwed. They're
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, and maybe that's the thing is that he's That's why the White Walkers are taking so long, is because they're just building a bigger and bigger army that they think eventually we can take down the wall. Real quick, I was thinking about something, and this may be something we have to we come back to in like a big Patreon episode or something. But they talk about how there was a huge pile of dragon glass at the Fist of the First Men that they found, right?
Yes.
That's all, but they're talking that we can't go there now. Maybe one of the threads George gave Dan and Dave was that a group of people go north of the wall, maybe not to get a white to bring it down to Cersei to show them that they exist,
But to get the dragon glass.
to get dragon glass so that they could fight this army, because John and Sam would know it's there. And they would say, "Oh, well, I know where there's a ton of dragon glass." I mean, that's just
That would make a lot more
speculation,
sense
but
than going and
it's just
capturing a
that
white.
it's just the fact that they reference it here, that it exists. It seems like it could come back at some point,
Oh, definitely.
and that could be something that we see, which is maybe it does still get on the same way, where a White Walker commander or whatever, if we end up getting like a Night King or something, does get possession of one of Danny's dragons and then knocks down the wall. I mean, like, you could, like, that's still a route you could go, just because it does seem like we're going to get that.
Oh,
You
no.
could still do dragon glass at Dragonstone. Obviously you could
Mhm.
you could certainly still do that if you want, but I mean, it's just interesting, and maybe that's something George thought about or planned, because obviously he references it here, and it seems like it's going to come back into play at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the other big thing is that, remember, Bran has to get back south at some point, and who's to say that Bran, with his new powers, does not see the need for this dragon glass and then brings it with him as well? I mean, I think Bran getting back south is going to be far different in the books than it would the show. I think that'll be one of the biggest differences. It's just Bran as a character, because
Or
the
maybe
show
that's
had no idea what.
maybe that's something we'll see with Benjen when Benjen also ultimately shows back up.
Yeah, I think Benjen is almost assuredly going to show up at some point. We know he's not cold hands, by the way.
Right.
In the books, he is not cold hands. Me and Matt think cold hands is dunk the egg, or dunk the egg. My God, dunk the
Yeah. Like
tall
the tall.
from dunk an egg. And we have a couple different reasons to believe that. But I think that Benjen does show up. And hey, who knows? Maybe that is part of it. Maybe Benjen's the one to deliver Bran back to Winterfell, or who knows, really. But I think you're right. I think that this stash of dragon glass is a massive point that is being hinted at us here, and it will pay off later.
Yeah. Okay. One other line, sort of the last one I want to pull up here. There is no crime so foul as the guest to bring murder into a man's hall. By
Hmm.
all the laws of the hearth, boom. There are no laws beyond the wall. Old man, remember, Dirk grabbed one of his crasters twice by the arm and shoved the point of the bloody dirk up under her chin. Right. And so essentially, and then of course, all hell breaks loose. But that line, there's no crime so foul as to kill a guest, as for a guest to bring a murder into a man's hall.
Man, I feel like that happens at the end of this book.
Well, is that really a guest bringing murder into a man's hall, or is that a man murdering
The guest in
the
his hall.
guest in his hall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big point is that there are customs that are abided by most people and agreed upon. And then when someone breaks that trust, it's horrible, which we will see at the end of the book. But also it shows that there are no laws south of the wall either.
Yeah.
It's not as honorable as what as they would like to think. There's also another hint at something later in this book that's hinted out throughout the entire book, actually, and this is just one of the many references to it. But they list off what's in the pack, Sam's pack, I believe,
Oh yeah.
and they say Tansy. And as we know, we have old Tully muttering underneath his breath, and Catelyn listening, Tansy, 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 and it's with a capital T in Catelyn's chapter, because she's thinking, oh, my father slept with someone named Tansy and he's having regrets, when in reality, Tansy is used to make a concoction of abortion, which we know that Liza Tully is end up forced to have. And that is one of those reveals that is a bit subtle later on, and putting it together, but really cool nonetheless. So every single chapter, George is laying down bricks for other things to happen, even whenever it's this far north and removed from the other POVs. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And remember, one of the other things that he brings up in this chapter is that horn. All the things he found. Oh, there's dragon
Mhm.
glass. There was this old broken horn.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think
Very, very interesting.
Samwell is going to have to piece it all together at some point.
Do you think that horn is going to be the Horn of Winter?
I think it's Dragonbinder. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I like the idea of
I've
the
always thought that would be the interesting way to do it, is to have like the horn switch. I don't know. I mean, that seems like
You'd
a
have to figure
lot
out
of,
why.
yeah,
Why
it
is
seems like a lot of work to be able to pull it off.
yeah. I like that theory. It's just you have to make it make sense too. Like,
Right.
especially now
But
that we
something is
dragons
going
can
to
go above the
happen with the
wall.
horn Sam has.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And why would the horn be with all of the dragon glass and broken if the horn is meant to bring down the wall? It just seems so interesting. Like, why would you have it? How would it get north of the wall with all of this dragon glass and everything? And then your goal is to knock down the wall. And now the White Walkers could go conquer it. So, like, is
Very
it the
good
Horn of
question.
Winter? It's very interesting. But something's going to happen with that horn, and Sam has it with him at the Citadel.
He does. And another thing about Sam that's interesting is that, the House Sigil of Tarly has the guy with the arrow on it. And Sam's asked to shoot arrows here and he doesn't do it. But it does seem like Samwell is maybe possibly competent with a bow. And then, of course, we have the house banner for Euron and his flag, and it being the big red eye, which Euron being kind of a parallel to Sauron from Lord of the Rings. And then we have Samwell the Slayer with a archery piece on his
Hmm.
banner. A lot of people think that the other eye that Euron has might get taken out by Samwell Tarly, and Samwell being the one that conquers Euron. That's one of my favorite theories in A Song of Ice and Fire, because I do think that Samwell is being set up to be this massive heroic figure in the history still. I
Yeah, I think
think
that that could also tie into, as well as George, if you, I mean, because George obviously does tie in a lot of other fantasy elements and other just stories that he likes. In a way, if Euron is sort of like the big bad and Sam is the one who takes them out with an arrow, in a way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of The Hobbit,
yeah,
right? I
yeah, that's
mean,
exactly it.
taking down Smog with the one little,
Yep.
piece of his scale that's missing, taken down. Yeah, it could be maybe like that's
And
something like
history
that.
repeats itself in A Song of Ice and Fire, and for no spoiler purposes, we know that people with one eyes sometimes get hit in their other eye.
Yes.
So, I think that I don't think it's completely unreasonable. The only other thing is that obviously we have the Sphinx near Old Town as well, who's very good with a bow that we see. Um, in the Feast for Crows prologue or epilogue, I can't remember which piece it is. So there's reason to believe there's a great bowman at Old Town. Euron's about to hit Old Town. There's a lot going on over there. That's actually probably the thing that I'm most excited for in Winds of Winter, is to see Old Town kind of come to the forefront with Sam there and everybody. I think it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And Sam is one of George's favorite characters.
Yep,
So
he
we
is
know,
George.
we know he's going to have a big role going forward. So
Mhm.
okay. Well, with that, guys, we want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing A Storm of Swords, chapter 34, Arya 6.
And if you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, or leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com or bendthekneepodcast.com.
We'll see you next time. And remember that winter is coming.